Voices of the Valley, episode 11. I'm here with Professor Carey Millsap-Spears. How are you doing today?
I'm fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on. I really appreciate any guest that comes on, so thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. So what do you do here at Moraine? Let's just start off there.
Well, I teach composition and literature mainly. Mainly teach Composition 1 and Composition 2.
Yeah.
I teach British literature occasionally, women's literature occasionally. Currently, I'm teaching LGBTQ humanities. And that's pretty much what I do.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So what's your favorite literature to teach? Seems like you're really into that literature aspect.
Well, I have degrees in British literature, so that's
Yes.
kind of
Your favorite one?
my specialty area, but I love words and writing. And I also teach intro to poetry occasionally, which I'm doing that now. I'm also a poet, so
Yeah.
that is something I'm interested in too.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know you were a poet. So when you write poetry, how different is it when you're writing like an actual literature book?
Well, I think poetry operates differently for people. So for a writer of poetry, there's a different creative process probably. Poetry is a much smaller venue. Yeah. So you have to pack a lot of meaning into short lines.
Yeah.
So that you have to kind of think of things differently. So I always like to tell myself, what's the scene and what's the situation of this poem? And so I do that also when I'm teaching poetry. What's the scene and what's the situation of the poem versus the idea, what does it mean? Because maybe it doesn't mean what we think it means, right? You know? So trying to just ground it, what is actually happening, and then go from there. But I don't really write fiction. I've tried it a couple of times, but that's not something that I generally do.
Yeah, when I write poetry, I feel like I'm always trying to convey an emotion. I don't know, like that's where I start off, is like, what emotion am I trying to put into it? For you, is it the same way, or is it more like, oh, I'm visualizing what I want the reader to feel, or what are you thinking of that?
Well, I think it just depends. I mean, it really does. I like to write persona poetry, meaning I take other people's lives and try to filter them through whatever voice that I come up with.
Oh, yeah.
So that's kind of what I generally do. I do write a little about myself or what I think or what I feel, but I really generally like persona poetry the best. I find those really fun to kind of inhabit someone else and what do they see, what do they think, and then just try to write their story. So I find that to be fun.
Yeah, that's cool. What's like, when did you start getting into poetry? Is that from a young age?
Maybe, but I don't think I really wrote a lot of poetry until I was in college and in graduate school. And I have, one graduate degree in British literature, and then I have another one in poetry writing. So, so I do have. It's two different sides of my brain, I like to tell people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So it's like the left and the right?
Yeah, one's more analytical and studying things, and the other one's more creating and building.
It's interesting you like exercising both those aspects of yourself. And to go get 2 degrees just shows how much you love both sides. You don't favor one over the other.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, so do you think you like teaching the British literature more, or do you think you like teaching poetry more? Which one do you find yourself having more fun doing?
Well, I think they're equally fun, for me, because I like to try to make things fun, because I like to try to put popular culture within anything that I do. So if we do something that's, old, like Beowulf, for example, which is from, about the year 1000. One semester, my students actually made a play of it themselves, and we actually put it on in the Shakespeare Garden for people to see us. So it was like trying to always make it now, even though it's old, right? And so that's poetry, and so intro to poetry is also poetry. So it's kind of similar, but I think the students' anticipation of something like a British literature survey is different than an intro to poetry kind of class. I think the students might think it's different.
Yeah, they definitely would think it's a little different. And so, so when you were growing up, like, did you always love literature? Were you always into reading books and stuff like that?
Yeah, I like to read from when I was young, for sure. But I grew up outside of a small town, Indiana, so I also like to be outside and in nature and, with my animals and all that stuff. So I think that I had kind of a well-rounded life. Yeah. So it wasn't just books, it was also actions and imagination, I think, is the other thing. So, in the olden days, we didn't have phones and things like that. So you could actually make stories, right, and make imaginative games. And so I think that also feeds my creative nature now, because I've fostered my imagination from when I was very young. And so I think that even with technology today, we can still do that, but we have to make an effort to do that.
Yeah, I think it changes the medium a little bit of what your imagination can do when you use technology. Can you think of anything like back when your childhood, like a game you made or like a memory you have that really like just has stuck with you throughout these years?
Well, I remember watching this movie. It was like a B horror movie called The Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
I saw that movie. I've watched that movie with my friends.
And I remember after watching that, we thought it would be funny to go out into the wooded area that we had outside of our house, and we kind of built structures to kind of pretend like that's where we would hide from the wooded tomatoes, you know, that would be out in the woods, right?
That's hilarious. And so, you know, that childhood imagination, that creativity, do you think like you've ever grown out of that? Or do you think that has always been something that's stuck with you throughout your life?
Well, I think most people who would know me would say I've never grown out of it, because I'm an epic nerd. I like to cosplay. I go to nerd conventions. I do all that stuff. Yeah. So I've never grown out of it, no.
Okay.
And I probably should have.
I'm so interested in cosplayers. Is it about just like looking like the person or actually becoming the character that you're cosplaying as?
Well, for me, because you know I'm older and my main genre is science fiction and Star Trek in particular. So in the olden days, you would just wear a uniform. It wasn't like you were being anyone. So that's a whole different thing. So at the Star Trek conventions, people just generally wear their favorite uniform, and there's lots of different ones, and people who wear from different series, you know, they'll kind of congregate. Oh, you like my series? I like that series. And then they'll just like make friends. And so that's kind of how that works. I think the other, you know, the more, you know, professionals who do the cosplaying, who kind of embody those characters, they spend a lot of time doing that, you know, practicing posing, for example, or, you know, like the way they walk, or all that kind of stuff. Like that's a whole other level. I mean, I enjoy watching it. I love to watch the cosplay like contest and all that stuff, because it's just so creative and fun, and people are just amazing. Like I've seen Transformers. I've seen like these really, really, really big, you know, like outer shells that someone's inside, and it's just really fun. Yeah,
that's crazy. And it's all like homemade stuff too. I think that's like a really cool part of it, is that you can't go out and buy those costumes. It's more just like you were making it yourself. And the amount of people that are really into it is so much. And I don't think it's like really talked about a lot in the mainstream, like of how many people are into that kind of hobby.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think that people don't realize how many people do this, and how big these fandoms are, and how people travel. So there was a big Star Trek convention only 2 weeks ago at the McCormick Place facility, and there were people there from Germany. There was someone there from Mexico. There was someone from Canada that I met. I mean, I can't even, I'm sure there was more, but those were people that I literally met. There were people from all over the country, you know, Texas, California, all over the US, plus, you know, just me that I just happened to run into.
Yeah. I love that like shows can create such a good community with cosplaying, or just going to conventions about it. I mean, you could meet people there and just have long-lasting friendships of what you've met, you know, people you've met. Like over the summer, I went to a Grateful Dead concert with my dad, and that was like where he was, you know, that's where he has been when he was a child. That's what he was doing, was traveling with the Dead. And so I got to meet the whole culture of people there. And there's a community of people like he knows there that I would meet, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like he met this person in a show in San Francisco. He met a person, you know, it's just crazy. Like I love that entertainment stuff can just make these like communities that people can grow from.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. Yeah. So is your main thing Star Trek, or have you cosplayed as anything else?
I mean, I did have a cute little Wonder Woman dress, but I bought that like at Hot Topic or something. So
oh, okay.
I don't think that counts.
Yeah, it was more for Halloween. So do you go to Comic-Con and stuff like that too?
I've never been to the big one in California. That's on my list of things I'd love to do. But it always happens during the middle of the spring semester, so it's kind of difficult for me to do that. But I've been to the Chicago ones, the C2E2, which is another big one.
Yeah.
There's one usually at Rosemont Horizons facility. I don't know if they're, again, with the pandemic, has kind of changed these companies, and some of them, one went out of business, and so another one bought another one. And so we'll see how it kind of will happen and what it will look like now after that, because they couldn't do them for a while, and so some of the companies aren't available anymore. But there's a lot of really fun ones out there. I have a lot of academic colleagues who go to these things. I have friends who write about all different kinds of series and different kinds of things that they love, and they go to these places and see each other too, and so it's fun.
Do you usually go with a group of people when you go to stuff like that?
It depends. Like this time I went with my brother and then a friend of mine who also is a teacher, and so we had a little, but again, it was just, a Star Trek convention is very different than like C2E2 or the big Comic-Con in California, because you see everything. This is a very, I would say this is like the nerdiest of the nerd. It doesn't get nerdier.
You think so? Has anyone like tried to dress up as like a monster from Star Trek or anything like that?
Maybe, but we don't really have a lot of monsters.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are some, but I don't think people can really, the monsters are usually people.
Yeah.
Because the show is really based on people.
On people.
Yeah, so it's not really like, I mean, there are some, you can make some arguments for things, but sometimes the characters who are like the bad guys, I mean, there were some of those, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And so do you think you like dressing up more as the good or the bad?
Oh, I usually only dress I only wear like a Starfleet uniform or something. Yeah, I don't dress up as a monster, or a bad guy. Although the only person in Star Wars that I like is Darth Vader, so I don't know what that says.
Oh. Why only Darth Vader?
I don't know, he's just cool.
Yeah, he's got a cool backstory, I think. He's like
got a cool outfit, a cape. I mean, I'm cool with the cape, that's good.
Yeah, I love the cape. I think if he didn't have the cape, he wouldn't be as evil.
Yeah, cape makes the whole thing.
Definitely. I think he's one of the best, like, in sci-fi, one of the best backstories of a character you can get. But I don't know, I don't watch a lot of sci-fi, but I grew up with Star Wars, just how you grew up with Star Trek. So, yeah, I grew up when the prequels were coming out. And, as a kid, I thought those were amazing. And then I watch them now, I'm like, oh, I was a kid.
Right. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So how does Star Trek, like, affected your life besides you just doing that? Do you think it's something that you've always had in you, or like?
Well, I guess I've told this story before. I actually went to a Star Trek convention in 2019 before the pandemic, and was part of a panel that talked about using Star Trek in the classrooms, and it was called Teaching with Trek, and I actually wrote an article about that was in a book. And so I was on a panel with other people from other countries who also use this kind of stuff in their teaching. And I had one panel just for myself, so I got to tell my story a little bit. And I said there that it kind of saved my life, actually, because I started watching it when I was about 7, and I didn't realize that there were all these possibilities. And there's all these different things someone could do. Because growing up in a small town in rural America, possibilities don't seem very real.
Endless,
I mean, they just don't exist. It's a very different thing. I mean, there's very certain things you can do in this space, and the idea that there is a whole world out there. Before the internet, before social media, before those ways you could find people like that, people in small rural communities, they probably didn't see the world in that way. And for me, it helped me see oh, there's we could do all sorts of things. And so it definitely changed the trajectory, I think, of my life.
Wow, that's very interesting. And growing up in that rural town in Indiana, I feel like you only got to see certain opportunities. There wasn't anything like Star Trek around. And then when it finally did come out, that's really what put you on that path of like, oh, I could go and do what I want.
Well, I mean, I saw it when it was in syndication, so it was on reruns, It was already over when I encountered it as a kid. And so none of my family liked to watch it. So I had to watch it on a little TV in the back bedroom, because that was the olden days. And so, but it was definitely something that I latched onto, that I kept in. My little brother, who's, grown now, but at the time I started introducing it to him, and so then we liked it together. And so when the new series came out, we would watch together, and so it just became something that was really special.
Yeah. So it's something you share with your brother, you share with yourself in your life. Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. And so is that part of pop culture that you like, just the sci-fi part, or do you like any kind of because when I think of pop culture, the first thing that comes to my mind is like Tarantino films, Well, I guess it depends on the person, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's totally popular culture, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that absolutely. I mean, people like Westerns, people like dramas, people like, long form music videos. They like, anything. I mean, I think it's a person, that's a very personal thing. Popular culture is a very democratic medium, right? Okay. Meaning that we all have access to it, and we all can choose the thing that speaks to us.
Yeah.
And so it's actually part of the humanities, in that we can study it in the same way as we study some of the humanities. I just showed music videos in my humanities class today, and we studied it the same exact way as we did when we were reading some of the more classic literature that we do. And it's the same, but it's the access, I think, is different. And also when you take popular culture home and you're watching, your favorite film while you're sitting on your sofa with your dog, or that's a very different experience, because that's in your home, that's in your space, and you are part of that story. And so the connection is deeper, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, when you're at home by yourself. Yeah, I think so. I'm of the mindset where, when I see something at home and I like it, I just want to show as many people as I can. And I feel like, I don't know if that's a human thing, or if that's just what pop culture does to us. It's just as soon as you see something that's cool or something that's funny, I immediately want to show it to people that I like,
Absolutely. There is that aspect to it. And if you think about it, Shakespeare was popular culture in Shakespeare's day, right?
Yeah.
And it became popular. People told their friends, this is a great show, you should go see it. And again, that's that sort of democratic view. If you've ever seen the images of his old theater, the people who were on the ground, right, who would stand in the pit, the general admission, those were not the rich people. But those people wanted to go and enjoy it too.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And so I think that that's really important. It crosses economics and class and race and gender lines in a lot of ways that sometimes I think people don't really see at first, but it's really important.
Well, that's really interesting. How, in our modern world, how do you see pop culture crossing those boundaries as well?
Well, I think it really depends. I mean, I think you could answer that question infinitely.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it depends
true.
on the text that you're working with. So, the idea that, what streaming services can do versus what network television can do changes that conversation. What happens in the movie theater versus, direct to HBO, there's a lot of conversations that have changed because of that technology too, because before, when they would open movies at the movie theater, you would have to wait, however many months or weeks or whatever before it came to home, where you could watch it at home, rent it or something. And now when they release them both at the same time, that's changed that whole business, right? And so the access to those shows have changed, because going to the movies isn't cheap.
No, it's not cheap. And it's much easier to pay a monthly fee to watch whatever you want.
Right. So that has changed that. And the same thing with streaming services and, old time network television. What you can make on a streaming service is very different. You can make long form stories. And there's been a lot of research on the fact that there are more people of color working behind the scenes, as in directors and writers and in all the important roles on streaming services that you don't see in a lot of other
network shows and stuff like that.
And that's really important, because the more people we see in all areas of entertainment really changes the conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like Hollywood and a lot of network TV, it always comes off as super liberal. But I feel like when you ever talk to someone that's actually been in it, they tell you about how conservative it really is. You know?
And I also think that's an audience perception.
You think so?
Yeah, I think people watch different things based on their particular interests, and so they would gravitate to something that they particularly liked anyway. So if you liked something that was more conservative, you would watch that thing, right? And if you like something that was more liberal, you would watch that thing. And so it might change how you view entertainment. And especially now with algorithms and the way we see things, you only see what you already like. So your Netflix feed would look totally different than mine.
Yeah.
Netflix would probably never give me a Tarantino film to watch, even though I've watched his films. But that's not going to show up on my would you like to watch?
Yeah.
Because I haven't watched it on there. It doesn't know that I've seen it. But once it knows what it thinks you like, and then it shows you more of the same things, since you only end up your choices actually are very small.
Yeah. Wow. That's very interesting. I never actually thought about it like that. I remember in my film class, we learned about something called the Netflix effect, and that is you spend more time looking for a movie rather than actually picking one and watching one, when any of them could probably give you the same amount of, happiness when you watch it. And so, yeah, that's just crazy, like, that they have, like, kind of AI just trying to pick it out for you. I even have things where I'll watch something on YouTube, and then something will pop up in my Netflix thing from that YouTube thing I watch. Yes. And I'm like, oh, wow. Like, they're talking across my phone. Yes. These apps are talking to each other.
And that's what's important about science, like to bring it back to science fiction. Science fiction has been talking about artificial intelligence for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And kind of raising the alarm to that. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's something that we have to consider as an important part, because artificial intelligence, if it's programmed in a way where it is making diversity, issues harder, right? Which people have said that it is, then that creates a whole other conversation. But science fiction has been talking about that for a while.
Yeah, definitely has. Where do you see like the future of science fiction going? Do you think, in real world time, I think that science is going to go to like humans are integrated with machines, just somehow. Like, I mean, I know that Elon Musk is working on like that neurochip thing. It's going to go in your brain. I'm not going to be the first one to do that. I'm not sure who is, but I know they'll find somebody. I think like at some point, like machine and man will kind of combine. And I think science fiction has been talking about that for a very long time. I've watched old science fiction movies from the 50s, and it's been about that. So where do you think you see it going?
Oh, I don't know. I think science fiction is going to go where audiences take it, so fan responses to things drive storylines, and popularity. So if something's popular, they'll keep making it. So Star Wars, for example, with Disney Plus, they're making tons of Star Wars now, shows and cartoons and different things, because it's popular, and so they're going to make more of it. And so that world is continuing to grow. As far as like wearable technology, we already do it. I have a Fitbit on right now, right? We have to have phones because of the pandemic screening. You literally have to have your phone everywhere you go to either show your code or whatever to get, or you could use your phone to pay for something, or we're already connected to technology. It doesn't have to be embedded, but even fashion. So if you go buy pants or a jacket, they've changed the pocket sizes to fit phones.
Oh yeah, that's true. So like this thing in my pocket right here, it's always there, you know what I mean? But it's not part of my body, you know what I mean? I could always put it down and set it over there. I just wonder if there's ever be a point where you can't set it down. You know what I mean?
I mean, there are some people who are like that though, like who are pretty addicted to it. Right?
Oh yeah, super addicted to it.
So I don't know. I mean, I think that, anything is possible. And science fiction has been integrating, there's androids and robots and, people with different kinds of mechanisms on them. I mean, they've been doing that for a long time. And that, that comes out of the tradition of the Gothic novels from, the long, that time period where they're talking about monsters and all of that. And so that's where my expertise in this sort of like British literature has been able to kind of inform some of my discussions of popular culture, because I kind of know what that's from that story and that story and that's from that story. And so these aren't new stories. They've just been remade.
Exactly. Let me ask you a philosophy question. I'm just curious.
Oh, I don't know. I think I did well in philosophy.
Sorry, but it's about science fiction though. So we'll make androids, right? but we put human memories, feelings, and emotions into them. And, I don't know, they start acting like humans. Is that a human, or is that still an android? Is it life?
Well, that question has been explored in pretty much every sci-fi series that I adore. Like Battlestar Galactica, they had these whole creatures called Cylons. That same exact thing.
Yeah.
And they went as far as to actually be able to reproduce children with humans.
Wow.
And so in Star Trek, they have characters who are androids, and they had a whole episode about, do these androids have rights? And Blade Runner, for example, the replicants, the same thing. I don't know. I think that we have to start thinking about what life means individually. So for me, I get attached to these characters because I see them as, I see the humanity in the characters. And so then I have an emotional connection with them. And so of course I would say, sure, yes. But if you ask that question to people who've never seen these shows or don't understand these characters, they don't have that emotional connection, which is so important because it kind of speaks to the idea of learning to understand each other through text like this. So Cylons or androids or replicants, they can be stand-ins for people we haven't met yet.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember I played this old Fallout game. It's called Fallout 4, which is like the United States in a post-apocalyptic nuclear war. And there's this, agency that made something called synths, and they're the same thing. They're people that with memories and emotions, and the whole storyline that's played out is, are you destroying the synths, or are you joining with them so that, because they're human, and you have to like have that debate. And I think, I don't know, I like that games or movies or shows like challenge that kind of human aspect in you, because it gets you actually thinking about it, and it sticks with me after I'm done even watching it or playing it.
Right, absolutely. That's what makes it good, and that's what's going to make it keep into the realm of popular culture, because popular culture is like, anything that can get worn out, right?
Yeah.
So if a song is really popular one day, maybe in 2 weeks there's a new song, and that old song, okay, we throw that one out. We have a new one, right, that we can like. But if popular culture stays within the culture that it's representing, that means it has some deep, resonance for people, and that's why things, that have been around for, 50 plus years are have long standing fans, and then also still are being made, right? So, because it's still speaking to what's important, and I mean, and also, quite honestly, the business franchise aspect of it. Once you get a franchise that's really big, you can kind of churn out some of that stuff, because you already have a built-in fan base. So there is a whole discussion of mass culture, which is mass-produced culture. You have popular culture, sort of like the umbrella. You have popular culture being, stuff that could be, more sophisticated versus stuff that's not that sophisticated. But like if you watch The Simpsons is sophisticated, even though it doesn't look like it is.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of ways you can kind of separate it out.
Definitely. And which way do you lean more towards, the less sophisticated or the more sophisticated?
I think it just really depends. I mean, I think people would say that a lot of science fiction isn't sophisticated, but if you sit down and watch it, it's very sophisticated. Oh, yeah. There are people who say science fiction is for children. I would say no, not the science fiction that I've seen. Even some of the old stuff, I think it's sometimes in some ways kind of terrifying, because of the ways that it speaks to things in metaphors or extended allegories that kids kind of can relate to. But I think that it kind of also brings down the walls to those conversations pretty fast, because you're like, oh, well, we're not talking about hurting people because we're just hurting robots. But then all of a sudden, oh, I like this robot, now I'm hurting it, and now I feel bad. And so there's this, now it's the same thing when zombies were really popular. Everybody was, zombie, response team stickers and stuff on their cars. Yeah. But if you think about, well, what does it mean to hurt a zombie where you're really hurting a person, right? And so then that creates a whole other conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like in a lot of zombie stuff, they're depicted as this other kind of creature, and you're not really seeing the human behind it. They're people that died and came back. Really, that's like what a zombie is by definition. And so, like, is there still any of them left in there? And I think it also hints at like a fear of like immortality with people, or death. And that's like really what I guess relates to a lot of people. Is that, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I'm not I'm not a really big fan of zombies, so I don't know if I can really speak to too much. I read the World War Z book when we did that, the One Book, One College here a few years ago, and I watched, the old zombie movie, The Night of the Living Dead, which I think is really a cool film.
Yeah.
But I haven't done a lot of research on zombies. I mean, I find that I think people don't really kind of see them as people. They kind of see them in these hordes, these masses, and so it's easy to kind of dismiss the humanity when you just look at
the whole group.
A large group like that. But I think there is some really great stuff out there that has kind of made zombies more human. So they're and I think that there's conversations to be had about that. I mean, if it's okay just to kill a lot of people, but not one. I mean, there's just a lot. I mean, there's a lot of weird, correlations that happen in that conversation. I wish I could speak to it with a more educated view, but it's just not something that I study that much.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. It's weird how, a lot of our art imitates our life and how much of our life imitates our art. What do you think does more? Yeah. Do you think the art imitates more of life, or do you think life imitates more of the art?
Well, I think, again, that really depends, because you can find, I mean, especially now, I mean, I can find all sorts of things that imitate, the art that I like, right? I mean, because I have access to all that stuff. I think people create things, what they know. So, in your writing classes or even in reporting the news and things like that, you generally have to start with what is known, what is actually happening here. I worked in my student newspaper when I was in college. I wrote for a newspaper when I graduated. I worked for magazines and did all that kind of stuff. And it's a very different situation because you always have to start with what is actually here. And I think then making those jumps analytically, is a different form of scholarship, which I do now. But I don't know if I can say that because I did that previously that imitated this or vice versa. I don't know. I think they're all parts of a whole
thing. Where do you think art comes from? Like, I know that it's just ideas, but I guess I'm asking, where do you think ideas come from? Like, what is that creative thing in your mind that gets you to write that poem, or gets you to paint that painting, or gets you to make that movie? I remember, I don't know, I was watching some other podcast one day, and someone said that they think that aliens are ideas, which is that because it's this foreign thing, and that you just come out and you work with other people to make it better. You can make an engine, and eventually you'll go into an airplane. It's like this living thing that's growing in your mind that you eventually design and make. So I don't know. I guess I wanted your opinion on that. Where you think ideas?
I don't know. I think people's imaginations can take you lots of places.
Yeah.
And but I do think people have to have the time and the space to have imagination and creative moments.
Yeah.
So if we're working a lot, or if we have all of our day scheduled, it's hard to schedule time. Okay, I'm gonna be creative from 1 to 2:30.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is you have to kind of consider too that the pace of modern life is also impacting some of that.
Yeah.
And if you don't have, if you have the ability to, have weekends off, and then you have to, clean your house, or mow the lawn, or do all that stuff, that takes away those times for creative outlets. So I mean, I don't know, I think people have to kind of dedicate and create those spaces if they can, even to have the time to even, I don't know, dream about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I usually just do a spontaneous kind of creative thing. I can never plan out my creativity. It's always just a spontaneous thing that just ends up happening, and I fall in love with it. And I think for me that's how it works. I can never regulate how I can be creative at this time or not this time. And I guess this podcast right here is the thing where I can kind of be creative and do my own little thing just with my words. And so what is it for you? Do you think you can just tap into that whenever you want, or you think it's something that just comes out of you whenever it wants?
Well, I think there's both, but I think if you go to that well every day and say, okay, I'm going to be creative today, this time, 1 o'clock, I'm going to go do that every day. There's a time where there's nothing going to be there, so you have to let inspiration strike sometimes. But again, you have to have the privilege of time and of the moment. Okay, I have the privilege to go take a walk this afternoon for an hour. Not everybody does. And when I do that, I might come across something that sparks some creativity.
Yeah.
So I think that is why a lot of people don't create, because they often don't even have the time to even generate a spark of imagination, because life is busy and there's lots of things out there.
Yeah.
But I try to like give myself time every day to do certain things. So take a walk, or every day start my day with like a little plan of my day, and sometimes doing that helps think about something else. But I'm very lucky to have a full-time job, and so I know where I'm going to be every day. And people who have to like do DoorDash or something, they're running all day long, right? So it's a very different thing, but I'm very, very, very pleased and happy with the fact that I can do those things.
Yeah, it's all about keeping that imagination alive. That childhood creativity. That's the only thing, like, I guess from childhood you could really cling on to. That'll keep you in that little innocent-minded kid. At least for me, like that's how I feel when I go back to my imagination. I remember in my living room I would have fake wars, and I had this World War II book. I would just flip a page and I'd read it, and then I'd go and act out the battle in my living room. Do you have anything like that besides the Killer Tomatoes game?
I don't think I ever acted out wars.
Oh, yeah, I understand that,
Dolls, that kind of stuff. I remember, sure, with my siblings, but I don't remember anything else really. I do know my son was interested in the Civil War battlefields when he was in middle school, because they had a whole unit on the Civil War, and so we bought a book about the Civil War and looked at the maps, and then we ended up going to visit some of the locations one summer, and so I did that. I thought that was interesting.
Okay, cool. I think that's a good spot to end off right there. All right, thank you for coming on today.
Right.
That was a lot of fun.
All right, thank you.
No problem.